Well, welcome to Circle of Fellows, episode 108. We've been at this 12 a year for a number of years, and today the Circle is going to talk about mental wellness for communication leaders and a lot of adjunct topics. And it's all about pressure and more than that. But the pressure is on, as the promo said about this. Deadlines, shareholders, stakeholders, ever-present need to deliver. According to some of the data that we've seen, half of PR, marketing, and comms professionals reported experiencing severe stress, anxiety, burnout multiple times every year. 2 in 5 PR professionals feel pressure and or anxiety from their job every single day. And 60% of PR professionals have experienced mental illness, health issues, while 89% have said they've struggled with mental well-being. So that's where we're getting together to talk about it. I'm Brad Whitworth, as it says at the bottom of the screen. And this panel is going to dive into mental wellness in the communications profession. And I'd love to introduce you to my panelists today. I'm sitting in for Shell Holtz, who normally sits in this moderator seat, but I'm delighted to be joined by Amanda Hamilton-Atwell, and we'll let everybody introduce themselves in a minute, Andrea Greenhouse, Ginger Homan, and Mark Schumann. And Amanda, just where are you coming from? What's on your mind? What do you do for a living?
Hi, Brad, and good evening, or yes, on my side of the world, good evening to the people that linked into this session. I am from Pretoria in South Africa. I'm the founder and director of Business DNA. We've been in business for 24 years now, and we focus on employee communication, internal communication, and mainly research and employee channels, all the different channels that you nowadays get. But I would say research is our main focus area. And that's Business DNA and me.
Thanks, Amanda. And Andrea, over to you, a little bit further north from where I am.
Yeah. So Andrea Greenhouse, I'm the founder and owner of Vision to Voice. We're an internal communications agency. We do full service. And we work with clients across North America, mainly in the private sector, but some municipal government and universities. And one of our core values at Vision to Voice is well-being. So I'm really excited about this topic.
We're glad to have you with us. And of this group, you are the newest IABC Fellow. So welcome to this. And
freshly minted.
Yeah, we have to have you on all these coming up episodes too. You're in the rotation now. And let me turn it over to Ginger Homan. And Ginger, let us know about what's going on in your part of the world.
I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is smack dab in the middle of the U.S. I also have a communications firm, but I find that my focus over the past year has really shifted more to writing. So I think I'm shifting out of being permanently in the strategy space, and it's been fun. I'm having a good time.
We're glad to have you with us, and let me turn things over to Mark Schumann and ask you to weigh in from, is this down south or up north, or you're a global traveler?
I'm today in Houston, Texas, and I think about this topic every day as a coach. I'm coaching every day leaders who are trying to find new ways to listen to themselves and listen to the people they lead, and deal with workplaces that certainly do have more stress and pressure than they did several years ago. So I live this every day. Can't wait to hear from our colleagues.
Well, and if you're joining us live today, don't forget that you can ask questions and share your own experiences and observations. If you didn't make it to the live and you're watching a recording of this, we hope you're enjoying this video replay, but also maybe you'll pass the word along and have others, some colleagues, to invite them to watch this as well. And we'd hope you join us for one of the live webcasts in the future. Let's go ahead and dive in and start to explore this whole concept of managing stress in the workplace, and especially as it maybe affects us as communications people. I guess the first question is, what are some of the most common sources of stress that tend to affect the communications folk, maybe more so than others? Anybody want to jump in and be brave enough to start it?
Okay, I'll be brave enough to start it. I think the main source of stress and burnout and the feeling of being mentally unwell is the fact that our work is out there for everybody to criticize. You know, if you're an accountant, you have your numbers here in front of you. You don't put it on a billboard, you don't put it on a poster, you don't put it in a publication. And our work being out there, and so many people in organizations think that it's so easy to communicate because all of us can do it. And all of them, so often I find that people in a middle management, that level, tend to think that they can communicate whatever much better than the communication professionals. And for me, that is a great stressor because people, communication professionals, are often criticized for things that's totally unnecessary.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of expand on what Amanda said. So we have a lot of communications professionals are perfectionists because our work is out there, but we're human and we make mistakes. We make typos. We send the wrong email to the wrong distribution list. And I do a lot of culture work, and one of the things I talk about a lot is psychological safety. And psychological safety is about being feeling safe to make mistakes. And communication professionals just don't, and we don't. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I guess the other thing that we talked about and is in the headline is the deadlines. Like, this is busy work, and we're often under-resourced, and especially in the area of work where I am, internal communications, we never, most teams are badly under-resourced. We're the Cinderella story of communications. And so that creates a problem for internal communication professionals for sure.
I think Andrea said something really important about the self-compassion. I was reading a blog post the other day that made reference to a study. The study was out of University of Montana, I think, one of the M states, but it was on vets from Afghanistan and PTSD. And what they found was that PTSD was not related to the severity or the duration of combat, the time they'd spent in combat, but it was closely related to how much self-compassion they had. So I think that really resonated with me when Andrea talked about that. I mean, our work is very public, and we do tend to be perfectionist, and not having, if you don't have a lot of self-compassion, you tend to ruminate over the mistake or how many deadlines you have, and instead of just taking a deep breath, knowing yesterday was yesterday and what am I going to do today to make it better to meet the goals. So I think self-compassion comes into play quite a bit too.
I love that. I also think about the roles that we play in organizations, whether these are organizations where we sit or organizations where we visit. Again, I think our roles, our work is all about how we listen, and we hear more. And I think that we hear more pain, and we hear more about how organizations can sometimes make it tougher for people to feel good about how they work. And so I think part of our stress is, what do I do with everything I'm hearing? And how do I use what I'm hearing to help the organization move forward? And that's huge, because we may be among the few who are hearing everything that people in the organization are feeling. I think that the change we see and the positive change is that we talk about it. And we now have words that are in our vocabularies in organizations that a decade ago weren't here.
Well, maybe this is related, but has the problem always been there, but we haven't heard it and we haven't talked about it, or it was sort of unseemly because we sort of internalized it, or this just comes with the job?
30
I
years
think
ago.
it's, you
go
go.
ahead. I was going to say 30 years ago when I started working, I struggled with the stress of my job. And my boss kept sending me on stress management courses. But the real problem was I was doing the work of 3 people, and I struggled. It wasn't the stress I was struggling. I think a big thing is priority setting, like what is important and what is not. And that always gets back to strategy. And it's something that we work on all the time in our own agency and with our clients. So it's like, okay, you've got 5 different things to do. We can't do them all at the same time. We've got to pick one. So what is it?
Well, I not to be in competition about how many years, but when I started doing this work almost 50 years ago, it was a different time, and I think there were things that in that moment we accepted as this is the way organizations work, that generations behind us feel they can question and can challenge. And I think COVID kind of put this whole change into turbo speed. And one of the challenges I find every day with the leaders I coach is they're longing for the good old days without necessarily being able to describe or detail what the good old days were, but wanting a moment when people perhaps challenged less than they challenge today. But thank goodness we're in workplaces where people feel open to question, whereas 30, 40, 50 years ago, we didn't.
What concerns me from many organizations that I work in is that being stressed is sort of, the place to be. Because if you're not stressed, you probably don't understand the severity of this strategy. And so from the highest level to the lowest employee in the organization must always complain about the level of stress they have. And I think that is something that we as communication professionals should break. Andrea mentioned something before we started the conversation about fun. No, Joy, what did you say? Fun. That we must start a new culture, a new communication style that people can enjoy their work, because I think it is a culture that people feel they must be stressed and they must be, under pressure, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and that does bring up a point. Some of it is self-inflicted. We had to create the burning platform if we wanted to get change in the organization. So we built the case for this is why you need to change, without necessarily thinking through all the human aspects of this. Just sort of to share from one of our viewers in terms of longevity, our friend Brian Kilgore from Toronto just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that he got into this field back in 1970 to.
Okay, you win.
Yeah, the competition goes on, and it's not pressure; it's just friendly sharing.
I think what Amanda said about hustle culture is really important, and that sometimes it's something we internalize and then we get caught up in it. And what I think is really important is, and something I really wanted to say, so now's the time to say it, is that the creativity is not born from burnout. It's born from when you have time to take a rest, a break. My best ideas sometimes come on the trail when I'm running, but we don't give ourselves that space and we don't allow ourselves to rest. And I think of humans aren't resources, they're a source. And if you want ideas and energy, you can't burn people out or work them too hard. And so we need to change our mindset about this.
Yeah.
I love that. And because I think in addition to words like stress and pressure and all these kind of draining words that we now hear so often, I also hear people talking about joy and asking themselves what brings joy more than I heard in years past that have now reached large numbers. And I think that I love what you described, Andrea, because I think that if we ask ourselves in this world and this work that can feel really stressful, what brings me joy and what makes me feel joyful and what makes me feel the best about what I can do, and use that as kind of a core fuel for then how do I maneuver and navigate those situations that can be stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It changes the lens on how you look at everything if you're asking yourself that different question. I like that. But one of the things I've heard all of you reference is the strategy. And I cannot help but think every time a report comes out on the state of our industry and we see that, anywhere from 30 to 40% of our colleagues are working off a strategic plan, one that aligns with the business results. And I would love to see a study done of those people working off of a strategic plan to see if their level of stress and well-being is less, because I think it has to be, because when people are coming to you with, from every directions with requests, and Andrea, you were talking about doing 3 people's job, and there's no way to stop doing the non-essential stuff. I mean, that just spells burnout to me.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing that you can do if you're in this industry is create the strategic plan if you haven't done that already, so that you're in alignment. Because then it's easy to say, I hear your request. It sounds really great. It's important. But here's our plan. And these are the initiatives, that this team is working on this year. And it's a way to protect your people too. So it just, Amanda, you should do that research.
Yeah, I should. But, Ginger, I have actually experienced this in real life. I started to work with a client a couple of years ago. She was totally overstressed. She was, she was like everywhere and nowhere. You should see her strategy. It was like in 35 slides, and you couldn't make head or tail of what is this all about. So we started to work, and this whole thing about a strategy, have a simple strategy. And when people come to you, say, okay, great stuff. Let's see where this fits into the strategy, and have the numbers, because that I also found reduced her stress significantly. When she said, this is my strategy, these are my targets, this is what I'm going to do. You approve it. Yes, we approve it. And then suddenly she was in the power seat because she could prove impact. And that had a significant impact on her stress level. So I would recommend one of the things that you should do is to have that thing, Ginger, that you just referred to. Have a strategy and stick to your strategy, because then you will be able to prioritize, and you will see where you are going.
And it gives you the way that
one of our fellow fellows actually is making the same point
Alice.
too.
Hi, Alice.
Alice Brink says that focusing on strategy can contribute to mental health.
Yeah.
So thank you, Alice, for weighing in.
Most of the people.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say strategy is also about control, and what we know about burnout is it's a lack of control. It's not only workload, but it's a lack of control over that workload. So if you have a strategy, you have some semblance of control. But often what I see is communicators have a strategy that sits in a folder on their laptop instead of sharing it and making sure that everybody knows this is the strategy that we're pursuing. The other thing we do with clients is that we do a monthly analytics report with recommendations. Okay, and a lot of it is what we can stop doing. Like a lot of people in organizations, everything's got to be extra, like extra effort, whatever. Like, how do we simplify, streamline the work that we're doing and eliminate things?
And how much of the stress we feel as communicators is created by the people we're working for, whether they're our bosses, the leaders, or our clients. Because most of the people I coach are not communicators. They're the people we support as communicators, and often many of the things that these leaders bring to coaching is the uncertainty of how they are creating stress in their organizations and how they are creating pressure and whether or not they are being clear about what they need. And when you kind of take that perspective and put it together with, I think communicators were kind of wired to do what's needed to get the job done and support people. That is a condition for a lot of stress. And it's fascinating when working with leaders who I sometimes work with leaders who I think like to hide the dog toy. And what I mean by that is they know the toy and they're going to hide it, and they're going to almost take joy out of sometimes seeing if people can find the toy or find the answer or find the strategy. And so I think that puts on us a different role than sometimes we have played in organizations. And it is the coaching role to help leaders see themselves through the eyes of the people they lead, and to see how the clarity they bring is essential to keeping the organizational stress in check.
I'm reminded a little bit on that one, Mark, with a time in Silicon Valley with sort of, I'll say, two cultures and different approaches to the same problem. And it was one where it was an economic downturn, and I was at HP at the time, and HP looked at how do we reduce expenses, and they came up with this program of the 9-day fortnight, which was you work 9 days out of 10 and you got paid for 9 days out of 10. The opposite was at Intel down the road. My friends there instituted a program called the 110% solution, which gets at the same thing, but it was just one was I'll call it a little bit more human friendly. The other one was increasing the stress level. So we as counselors to our organizations can look at things and sort of go, your words are saying this, your actions are saying that, they need to be in sync. And, are you thinking about the unintended consequences of what you do? I guess we've hit a little bit upon this, but maybe we can get a little bit more specific about how can you recognize stress in the organization if you're, a leader in an organization or you're an agency working for. What are the signs of stress, and then we can figure out what do we do with it. But any concepts of that's it.
I think people don't have clarity, and you start to see that goals are not being accomplished. Work, I mean, it's not just the energy. And what am I trying to say, Andrea?
I think it's not hard to figure out. Like when you're working in an organization, even as a consultant, like you're always watching engagement, you're watching things like Glassdoor reviews, your like you're understanding with the pulse of the organization, how they're feeling. What are the questions at the town hall? Like we do town hall makeovers, and we had a client and they were struggling to get their, get interest and engagement in their town hall. So we're like, well, what topics are you talking about? And we guided them to be, sorry, this is a bit of a long answer. Guided them to focus on the topics that employees cared about. In this one organization, there was a sense that wellness, burnout, and that was important. So they had a town hall that specifically talked about that. They had the CEO talk about his own journey. They had guests. They had involvement from employees. Well, the town hall metrics went through the roof because they were actually talking about what employees were cared about. So I think you have on that, and then you need to talk about it.
Andrea, sorry, sorry, Mark. You talk about town halls. I often see that people dread meetings and their stress levels go sky high when they have to attend meetings with specific people. And then I sit there, because often you must make a presentation in the meeting, and you see the bullying in that meeting by being done to people, and you think, these people, this organization has these policies, but if you look at this meeting, it's definitely not looking, applying the policy in a meeting. Yes, other places, but in this meeting. And I think as communication professionals, because and Mark also referred to it, we are more observant. We see things that we might be there on a specific contract, but then we see other things because we are behavioralists.
Yeah.
And I feel it is one of our responsibilities to, even though it's out of our specs, to go and talk to the leaders that be and say, well, this is what's happening in the meeting. And the meeting, like the town hall, is a core engagement area where we must reduce stress. We must make it a positive experience and not make people, if I go onto certain meetings online, I have to put on red lipstick just to make myself feel more confident. And that trend we should stop as communication professionals.
I think it begins with and continues with how we listen. I like to think of us as, in any organization, the listeners in chief.
Yeah.
And I think that our ability to know what to listen for, and to listen for the clues of stress. And when I was in my head of culture gig a few years ago, and I would, I think at one point we were talking to about 1,500 of our people per month in little informal chit chats, simply to listen, and then to take what we heard and share it with the leaders who could do something with it. But listening for those signs of people who are not bringing their best, not feeling their best, and not contributing their best. And it's little things. It's the little things. As people would run off to get coffee or food and saying, I don't have time to eat. Or we would see this crazy thing happen in the organization of people running from meeting to meeting with their laptops open for fear that they might miss an email while going up and down the stairs. It's listening for what are the clues that we have something larger happening here, and then having the open conversation about what can we do about it, and finding the core. And usually I think it many times in organizations, it's finding and following the fear that is ultimately prompting the stress.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I
listen.
think,
Go ahead,
I
Andrea.
need to make a comment about connection, because we're all social beings. We need connection, and a lot of internal communicators are introverts, but even introverts need people. And in our busy world and work, we forget to pause and connect with people. And as Mark was saying, if you're with your head in your laptop up and down the stairs, you're not stopping and bumping into someone and saying, hey, how are you doing? So building in the specific activities or things in your organization, telling stories about connection and the importance of connection, I think is again, nurturing well-being.
Related is tech, whether it's AI or video conferencing or having a camera in your pocket and a broadcast capability, is that helping stress and some of what it is that we're talking about, or is it hurting it? Or any thoughts about its impact on the way we go about doing work?
It does both, I think. It depends on how you manage the technology that you choose to carry. Like I personally, and I often think that this is probably a bad habit, but I never check email on my phone. I wait until I get back to my laptop, because if I'm constantly checking the email and messages as they come in, I'm not present to wherever I am,
Yeah.
whether that's in a meeting with somebody else, walking up and down the flight of steps, or with my family. So I just don't do it. And people that I work with know if this is really important, I better text Ginger and ask her to look at that email. And then I will. But I just, I think it's how you manage the technology. But I see a lot of people who let it take over their lives 24/7. And that seems like a surefire way to get to burnout.
Yeah. And again, it's about like realizing or saying, you know, my time with my family is important and it fills my cup. So down goes the phone. The other thing is, I saw some interesting research from Gallup that said that employees who are happier and feel less stressed when they are hybrid or in the office. The more they're in the office, the better their mental well-being, which surprised me. They're more productive at home, but they're in the end happier at work, which a lot of people say, well, I don't know about that. But I read it this morning.
Yeah, it's because of connectivity.
Yeah, I love that. It is our knowing ourselves well enough and listening to ourselves to be able to say, self, you need these 5 minutes to do this or to do that, to bring your best and to be present for the rest of your day. The concern I get, and I work with a lot of leaders who are all remote companies or trying to deal with being hybrid and trying to figure out what to do. And I try to change the question sometimes, that it's not about where people are, but it's how we enable organizations to have moments of spontaneity. Because that's what I miss the most from our very organized, meet on the hour schedules, because there are spontaneous moments that happen in organizations when we are together that give us fuel. And if we're in a role or a situation that relies on machines, it's how can I find those spontaneous moments, even if I have to schedule them.
We're sort of the halfway mark in our hour of discussion, and a reminder of two things. One is, what is our topic that we're talking about? And we have been going around this general idea of mental wellness as it affects communications people and their stakeholders, the organizations they work for. So, sort of thanks for the reminder. And if you do have questions, this is a good reminder that you can pop it into the chat, and we'll be glad to tackle it. And I think our friend Brian Kilgore, who's been following us from the get-go, says, is your mental wellness affected if you're better at your job than your boss is, or if your CEO is dishonest? So I think I have a little bit of a story that I had to tell. A friend of mine who worked at General Electric back in the day when Jack Welch was the CEO, talked about how Jack would come up with a idea every week and wanted to communicate it across the workforce. And this communications person, the counsel was, slow down. Yeah, it's great that you got all these great ideas, but you're adding to that stress level. I'm not sure it's dishonest, but it's sort of the, as you said, Mark, we have to observe what it is that they're doing and be counseling them on what it is and the impact, both on the business outcomes, but also on the process outcomes, and the process involved people working together.
And responding to Brian and the question before that, I actually think that the key to managing the stress we feel and the managing and helping the organization manage its stress is how we encourage and enable organizations, their leaders, their people, ourselves to stand in our truth. So I think that the how we take what we hear and help organizations discover, embrace, and then move within and beyond their truth, that helps keep it all under control. And then in going back to the previous conversation, I kind of think there's a really fascinating connection here between our talking about ourselves and managing stress and then how we can take the talents that we have and the commitment we have and help organizations manage the stress. Because organizations are more stressful places than they once were, because there is a lack of clarity, sometimes a lack of truth, and certainly a lack of consistency in how people connect. And so how can we take our own commitment to what it means to feel healthy and use that as a lens and a prompt and a sense of duty to the organizations to help people.
And to build on that, do employees, are they more willing to openly share their stories? Because before it was sort of like the buckle up, just do the job, don't complain about things. But I think as communications people, as journalists, we love to tell things through stories, and the more real they are, as opposed to in the abstract, we're seeing 60% more people suffering from mental illness. Or, I mean, how do we, do people want to tell their stories? Do they want to help their colleagues with sharing and saying, yeah, things aren't great for me, and here's how I've been coping? What are you experiencing or seeing?
Well, I think that asks for a lot of maturity in the organization to allow for that, and maturity from a person to say, I am under stress and I need help. But a little bit of a change of a topic. When I prepared for this session, what I came across was that the extent to which, and I linked it to the IABC career milestones, that people in the foundation level tend to be significantly higher stressed than the people on the more than the people on the specialist generalist level, and more than the senior people in the organization. And I feel, as communication professionals, understanding the importance of focused messaging. What is the message that we are sending to these younger employees that come into an organization and suddenly they're faced with all these stressed people? And I think that they are double stressed because they don't perhaps understand why the people are stressed and what are they missing, and feel uncertain about all the changes in the organization, because I think that's one of the significant contributors to the stress levels, because organizations currently are in a constant flux. They move from one change process to another change process to another change process. And these young people, these other people, they seasoned, they know, just live it out, sit it out, it will pass. But these youngsters, they don't understand. They just see the changes and they faced with all these things. So what can we do to comfort them, to create a better organization?
I think as leaders in the senior fellows, we have a role to play with junior and mid-career communicators, helping, doing things like this. But I know with my team, people are new to the communications business. I'm like, it is a little hectic. It's deadline driven. This is how you manage it. And so hopefully they're learning from me, but I also am learning from them. I have a couple of Gen Z employees, and they're very good about setting boundaries. And I've learned that I need to respect those boundaries, and I need to set my own boundaries. So I think, the pen can only do so much, and our actions sometimes speak louder than words. And that experienced counsel is also really important.
Well, and Andrea, I think you told us earlier that before we got started here, that you actually do have check-ins with your team that focus on, how are you doing? How do you feel? Because unless that component of our lives is taken care of, it's really hard to get to all the other stuff that's expected of you. Maybe you could explain what it is that you do or how you go about doing this, and others could pick this up as a great best practice.
Sure. So we have bi-weekly check-ins. The more junior, the more frequent. And I ask, what are your barriers? How can I support? How are you managing? and then we work together to get strategies in place. And I think part of this is rooted in the fact that we do have well-being as a core value, and it was a value for all my teammates. So, for example, we have a healthcare and wellness spending account, but we also at the root of it is a recognition that if we take care of ourselves, our physical, mental, and emotional well-being, that we can be better for our clients. We can show up with energy. We can throw up with ideas. And really, it doesn't matter if you're internal or external, but understanding that if you don't fill your cup, or, a lot of us moms, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, then, we're not going to be good employees. And this applies, it doesn't matter if you're a communicator or, a person on the shop floor. You can't do a good job unless you show up healthy, happy, rested. Yeah. I don't understand why it's sometimes so difficult.
Well, some of it, I wanted to answer the Brian question sort of point blank. He said, what if you're better at your job than the boss is? And I think a lot of that is, what is the relationship and what kind of an approach does the boss have? I mean, there are bosses who, if you come in and you're smarter, they feel threatened by something like that. I actually worked for a vice president who said, I don't know as much about communications as you do. I'm going to look to you to do sort of self-guided career path, because I know a lot of things, but this is one field that I don't know. So I think some people feel threatened, others don't, and it is back to that building connections and building the understanding and building the mutual trust. So it can have add stress. Yeah, it could.
In one of the organizations that I once worked, we started a smile campaign, because we realized that the people never smile, because it was like nobody smiles. So we started a deliberate campaign. Okay, when you see somebody, when you make eye contact, you smile and you say hello. And it was hilarious, because people started to laugh, because they haven't done that for ages. And it's just such a simple thing to change the stress levels in an organization. So perhaps we should start as communication professionals and just, do the basic thing and say, okay, let's just get them to smile.
Well, I think that again comes back to our role as coaches and counselors. And I had a boss who was very committed to getting things done. So every time when he walked into the elevator at work, he was on his phone answering that email, because he was very committed to responding quickly. The message, however, that sent was one of disinterest and disconnection. And so when talking with people in our organization, and they said, well, what do you think it takes to, get ahead here? And they said, oh, you have to be on your phone every minute, because I see the CEO and he's on his phone every minute. And so I have to be on my phone every minute. And so I went to my boss and I said, did you realize that people see you when you're on your phone every minute? No, they're not looking at me. And I said, yes, they're seeing you, they're observing you, they're memorizing you, and they're using you as a reason for how and what it takes to move forward. And so I think that's where we can use our ears and our eyes and then our voices to help leaders see that even something as simple as looking at the telephone in the elevator can ultimately add to the stress people feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, now we're hearing some, I'll say, pragmatic ways about communicating explicitly or implicitly around stress, and sort of a good example and bad examples. And I think do you have anything else that you've run across that's like put this on the do list or put this on the don't list in terms of this topic, and how to bring it up in the workplace, and sort of the potential risks of mishandling communications about a very, very personal topic?
I think one big mistake a lot of organizations make is they're like, oh, you can have every second Friday off and then everything's going to be fine. Or they build a gym and give you have fitness classes, but they fill out your calendar at lunchtime. Like, and there's only so much we can do. Like, again, the last time I had a job, which, okay, it was like 25 years ago, but at this company, they built a gym and I was responsible for communicating all the wellness stuff. And I'm like, well, if we don't have senior leaders down there at lunchtime showing it, setting an example, or if we fill people's calendars with meetings and don't make it the norm to take a break at lunch, people won't use it. So how do we, we can only do so much with communication, and recognizing that there's going to be a big disconnect if you communicate one thing and leaders are doing something else.
Yeah, I'm sure some leaders I don't want to see in spandex. Thank you very much. At lunchtime or anytime.
There was one guy.
goes.
Yeah, he was always in the gym, and it gave me a great relationship with the senior vice president, who was, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Ginger, you had something to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, part of it goes back, and this is in the coaching vein that Mark brought up a few times, towards shifting the conversation to one of abundance, right? I've got some clients who are very conscious of, the scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. And once you shift into that abundance, you realize, okay, I always have a choice. Everybody keeps scheduling, meetings at lunchtime, or, whatever is happening in your space, but you always have a choice. And how can I, what are resources that I have that I haven't seen yet? Or if I were to experience the situation differently, what would I notice? And really just stepping back. With my team, I always use the example of a kaleidoscope. You're stuck on this problem because you're asking the same question and you're not getting the answer you want. So if you were to use a kaleidoscope, what are some other questions that you could ask and approach it from a different way? And we find that just opens everything up. It's different.
Everything. You referred to that earlier, Ginger, when you talked about bringing in the word joy. One of the things as a coach, when, many times people come to a coach because they're feeling stressed, or they're feeling pressured, or they're feeling behind. And many times I'll take a different approach and say, and what do you feel grateful for today? Or what where's the gratitude in your moment, and who have you most recently said thank you to? And realizing that we're kind of complex beings, and all of these pieces of wiring kind of connect to each other, and sometimes how we listen to ourselves can either fuel the stress or actually intervene and help us see our way through the stress. And sometimes it does, just as you described, Ginger, takes a different question.
Yeah, Mark, for me, that is the big thing. And that I want to mention here is just ask a different question. If you constantly ask, what is wrong with my job? What is wrong with this organization? Guess what will be the answer? What is wrong? But if you ask, what is great about my job? What is great about this organization? How do I benefit from this organization? The answer will differ, and your stress level will probably be impacted as a result of that.
And oh no, go ahead.
No, I once heard the story that somebody said you should never say that you are stressed. You should say that so many people depend on my output at the moment, because that puts you in a position of power. When you say you are stressed, you disempowering yourself.
I just love this comment from Larian about getting to the root cause. And this is where, as we look at ourselves and the skills and experience we bring and the curiosity we bring to ask the questions that could help organizations find what is at the core of the stress our people feel, what is feeding the stress, and then how do I contribute to that stress as a leader, whether or not I'm aware of it. But I love this getting to the root. And many times I find that's follow the fear, and you'll find the root. Thank you, Larian, for that.
And I think
I like that. Follow the fear.
Yeah.
And as I get older, I realize how often curiosity is the answer. I love that you brought that into the conversation, because every time I get stuck, it's usually because I stopped being curious, right? And I think that this is impossible, that this can't be done. But if I then step back and say, okay, if this were actually possible, what would my next step be? So I love that you brought curiosity up.
And I think the idea too of, I mean, we are all experienced, we have some ideas, we have some answers, we have some possible solutions, but to what degree can we involve employees, our audiences, in helping shape the both the root causes, defining the problems, and helping come up with solutions, because they're more likely to buy into it if they're a part of the process, as opposed to the recipients on the far end who don't necessarily want the gym or don't need a new newsletter, or the EAP program is not the answer to what it is that I have. The other thing that I heard coming out, and we really haven't explored this too much, but is the diversity. There is sometimes this one size fits all approach. Oh, you're feeling stressed, therefore you should do this. And the answer is that may or may not be the answer to that person's way of dealing with issues and stress. So as communications people, how do we sort of involve those who are sort of experiencing things either on our teams or in the organization in helping come up with solutions and looking at that diversity that is rich in an organization and we want to continue? That was a long question, but I made them all think, if you noticed, so that's good.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I'll throw up a comment that Alice Brink shares. It's nice to have a sixth IABC fellow with us, but it's not just our own mental well-being, but also how do we do the communication skills for the greater good of the communities around us, whether it's employees or our family or what have you.
I actually think that the answer is in our own history as an organization. There was a period, it's almost 20 years ago, when we said our purpose was to create platforms for people to be heard. And I think we were quite ahead of our time when we described that as our sense of purpose as an organization and as professionals in this space. But if you go back to that and you think about the opportunity for every voice in an organization to be heard, there is no work we can do more important than to make certain that people feel heard and that something is done with what is heard. And the only way that we can appreciate the diverse world we live in and work in is if we listen to all the voices in that world. And if technology is a challenge in any way, it's perhaps because it makes it so easy to only hear the voices that want to agree with me rather than all the voices that might be filling the world.
But Mark, is one of the challenges that we as communication professionals have not to produce less communication channels and be more involved in the actual conversation in the organization and guide people, help leaders to have conversations with people. Because I feel, Brad, if we want to get to the diverse range of people, a newsletter won't do it. A WhatsApp group won't do it. But me as a leader need to have a conversation with these people. And in these little spaces, we can make a difference. But my experience is that communication professionals more often than not say, interpersonal communication, that's not my space. I produce newsletters and I do activations and I do all these things. And I feel if we really want to make a difference, we should be courageous enough to say, let's get involved and create healthy conversations in an organization.
Yep. Welcome back, Andrea. We missed
We lost
you.
her there for a minute, but
We did.
I
The
agree. And
challenges of
Amanda, I've
technology.
sort of described it as at some point our responsibility is not just the communication tools and channels, but is creating the communications environment that involves everything from face-to-face communications to some of these mass media things. And the other one that is just so powerful, and I'm not sure we have hit upon the right solutions yet, are the non-formal networks that exist in all organizations. And read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, or see some of the work that's being done by Karen Stevenson and her organization, or Innovisor out of Belgium, because there are support networks and ways things get done without our /help/intervention. And so we need to find ways as communications people to take advantage of these non-formal channels that are extraordinarily useful, highly credible. In past, we probably used pejorative terms like the grapevine and the rumor mill to describe these things because they were taking away from us. But instead, it's like the additive effect. How do we add them in without screwing them up?
Go ahead, Mark.
No, you go ahead.
Well, look, I talked about psychological safety before, but there's a lot of small things that we can do as communicators to build psychological safety, which basically is making sure that everyone feels that their voice is valued and important in organizations. And it's things like at the end of every article, inviting conversation. It's things like talking about failure. It's things like showing how it's okay to ask for help. So I think that's a critical thing in organizations that helps raise those voices. Mark talked a lot about listening, but you can't listen if people don't feel safe to speak up.
And I love that. And I think that the first thing we can do, and we can each do today or tomorrow, is to ask ourselves, what can I do to help my leaders feel more comfortable listening? And how can we as an organization feel more willing and more trusting of what we hear? I think if we ask ourselves those questions, it opens us up to creating and to being a part of organizations where it is safe to talk about what doesn't feel good. And when we can hear what isn't working, we have a much better chance to help our leaders address what needs to be done.
Yeah, so good.
Well,
so good.
We are approaching the top of the hour, and I wanted to, if nothing else, give each one of you a chance to, I'll say, produce closing thoughts, some last words of the, having heard this discussion. If you were to offer counsel to someone who's watching this, what's the next step? What should their takeaway be? How can they get involved? And we've heard it, but can you sum it up in that little 30-second? If I were you, or if you want to become a fellow, just follow this sort of counsel. Maybe it's not that, but where do you think this has been, and how would you sum up this conversation around the idea of mental wellness for communicators and the audiences that they serve?
Well, I started, so I will end as well. I think my greatest advice to people to change mental wellness would be to smile, because smiles are contagious. And if you smile, people will start wondering why. So just start a smile campaign.
My advice would be to understand this topic, it's not Wellness Wednesdays. It's not meditating. There's so many elements to well-being and particularly mental health that start reading and start learning and become an expert in your organization. And it'll help you, it'll help your team, it'll help your company.
Mine would be to ask some new questions. You know, put yourself in the director's chair, and see the options that are truly there, because we do have choices, and to go have those conversations where you listen hard.
And real quick, mine is ask yourself what makes me curious about myself, my leaders, my organization, and follow that. And have good chats like this one.
Yeah, and I guess the other piece that I've felt as being a part of the Fellows organization, but in general, is caring for others. Yeah, you got to care for yourself, and that's some of what the first part of this conversation was about. But that sincere interest in others and their well-being, as well as the, not only what are you doing, but the how are you feeling, and we've too often put that on the back burner. But I want to thank all of you for having participated, and the people who've been adding comments, Alice and Larian and Brian, who've been regular contributors to this. And I hope you're going to join us next month for the Circle of Fellows. The episode is number 109. It's coming up on Thursday, the 17th of October, 5 p.m. Eastern. It's actually the Friday the 18th on the other side of the international date line. And we do have Zora Artist joining us from Australia. Priya Bates is going to be a part of the panel. Shell Holtz will actually be on the road again next month, so I'll be back to moderate. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode 108. So my huge thanks going out to Amanda, to Andrea, to Ginger, to Mark, our listeners, and also a big thanks to our behind-the-scenes coordinator on all this, Anna Willey, our executive producer. We couldn't do it without her. And a big thanks to all of you for tuning in and watching. So thanks very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Brad.
you.
Bye-bye.